Commander Jake Morrison stared at the sensor readings on his screen and felt his heart skip a beat. The UES Guardian had been conducting routine surveys near the edge of the solar system for 3 months now, and nothing this big had ever appeared on their instruments. The energy signatures were massive, unlike anything in their databases. "Lisa, are you seeing this?" Jake called to his pilot, Lisa Chen, who was monitoring the navigation systems from her station. Lisa looked up from her controls and frowned at her own displays. "Those readings can't be right. Something that size would have to be bigger than a city." From across the bridge, Communications Officer Ryan Davies suddenly straightened in his chair. "Commander, I'm picking up multiple contacts. They're coming from beyond Pluto's orbit, and they're moving fast." Dr. Amanda Brooks, the ship's chief scientist, rushed to her instruments and began running calculations. Her face went pale as she processed the data. "Jake, these energy patterns don't match anything we know. This isn't human technology." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Jake had trained for this moment his entire career, but now that it was happening, he felt completely unprepared. First contact with an alien species was supposed to be handled by diplomats and scientists back on Earth, not by a small exploration crew millions of miles from home. "How long until they reach us?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "At their current speed, maybe 6 hours," Lisa replied, her fingers dancing across her controls as she verified the calculations. Jake opened a communication channel to Earth. The delay would be significant at this distance, but Luna Command needed to know what was happening. "This is UES Guardian to Luna Command. We have multiple unknown contacts approaching our position, requesting immediate instructions." While they waited for a response, the alien ships continued their approach. Through the Guardian's telescopes, they could see the vessels more clearly now. They were unlike anything humans had ever imagined, sleek crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them. The largest ship was easily 10 times the size of Earth's biggest space station. Admiral Marcus Stone was reviewing supply reports at Luna Command when the priority alert flashed across his screen. As Earth's highest-ranking military officer, he had been briefed on first contact protocols, but he had never expected to use them. The Guardian's message sent a chill down his spine. "Get me the President," Stone ordered his aide, "and contact all fleet commanders. I want every available ship ready for departure within the hour." The alien fleet dropped out of whatever faster-than-light drive they were using just outside Earth's orbit. Thousands of ships materialized in space, blocking out entire constellations. Their arrival was silent but overwhelming, a demonstration of power that left no doubt about their capabilities. On the Guardian, Jake and his crew watched in awe as the massive fleet arranged itself in a perfect formation around Earth. The precision was flawless, as if every ship knew exactly where to go without any visible communication between them. "They're broadcasting something," Ryan announced, his voice tight with tension. "It's coming in on multiple frequencies, and somehow it's in perfect English." The main screen flickered to life, showing the image of an alien being. The creature was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. When it spoke, its voice was calm and emotionless. "I am Overlord Vextar of the Zephyrian Hegemony. Your world has been selected for galactic integration. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally to Hegemony authority. Resistance is futile and will result in the complete annihilation of your species." The transmission continued, with technical details about the surrender process, but Jake barely heard them. His mind was racing, trying to process what he had just witnessed. These aliens had traveled across the galaxy to conquer Earth, and they spoke about it as casually as discussing the weather. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter was in an emergency meeting with her top advisors when the alien broadcast reached them. The message was being transmitted simultaneously to every communication device on the planet, ensuring that every human being heard it at the same time. "How many ships are we looking at?" Carter asked General Frank Powell, the head of Earth's Unified Defense Forces. Powell consulted his tablet, his expression grim. "Our best estimate is around 3,000 vessels, ranging from fighter-sized craft to ships that are larger than our biggest cities. Their technology appears to be centuries ahead of ours." "What are our options?" Carter asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Limited, Powell admitted. Our most powerful weapons are nuclear missiles, and I doubt they would even scratch the surface of those ships. These aliens have technology that can manipulate space and time. We're completely outmatched. Dr. Kevin Walsh from the Deep Space Research Division cleared his throat. Madam President, there might be something else we can try. It's experimental and extremely dangerous, but we've been working on some projects that might give us options. Carter looked at him with interest. What kind of projects? I can't discuss the details here, Walsh said, glancing around the room. But we've been exploring some theoretical physics concepts that could level the playing field. We call it Project Midnight Sun. On the Guardian, Jake made a decision that would change everything. Instead of retreating to a safe distance as their orders specified, he moved the ship closer to the alien fleet. If humanity was going to face extinction, he wanted to learn everything possible about their attackers. Jake, what are you doing? Lisa asked, her voice filled with concern. Getting a closer look, Jake replied. These aliens think we're primitive, but they don't know humans very well. We need intelligence, and we're the only ones in position to gather it. As the Guardian approached the alien perimeter, Dr. Brooks began scanning the enemy ships with every instrument they had. What she discovered would prove crucial in the days to come. The alien vessels used energy shields that were incredibly powerful but had a specific harmonic frequency. More importantly, hidden among the massive warships were smaller vessels that appeared to be carrying civilian populations. Jake, I'm reading life signs on those transport ships, Amanda reported. Thousands of them, but the biological signatures don't match the aliens who are running this fleet. Prisoners, Ryan suggested. Or slaves, Amanda replied grimly. The 72-hour countdown had begun, and Earth was facing the most powerful enemy in human history. But as Jake and his crew continued their reconnaissance, they began to uncover secrets about the hegemony that would soon turn the tide of war. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity's refusal to surrender, and they had no idea what humans were capable of when their backs were against the wall. Overlord Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth turn slowly beneath him. The small blue planet looked peaceful from orbit, showing no signs of the primitive civilization that inhabited its surface. In his 3 centuries of conquest, Vextar had seen hundreds of worlds like this one, and they all ended the same way. Subcommander Keltris, begin the demonstration phase, Vextar ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been disobeyed. Keltris activated the tactical display, showing the locations of Earth's major military installations. As always, Overlord, we shall eliminate their defensive capabilities first. Once they see the futility of resistance, they will surrender, as all the others have done. The hegemony had perfected this process over centuries. They had conquered over 300 worlds, and no species had ever successfully resisted for more than a few days. The pattern was always the same. Initial shock, desperate resistance, then inevitable surrender when the aliens demonstrated their overwhelming technological superiority. On Earth, President Carter had called an emergency session with world leaders from every major nation. The conference room was filled with tension as representatives tried to comprehend the magnitude of the threat facing humanity. We have less than 60 hours remaining, Carter announced to the assembled leaders. I need to know what military assets we can bring to bear against this threat. General Powell stood up, his expression grave. Madam President, I'll be frank with you. Our conventional weapons are useless against their technology. Nuclear missiles can't penetrate their energy shields, and our space-based defenses were designed to handle asteroids, not hostile alien fleets. The room fell silent as the reality of their situation sank in. Earth's most powerful military leaders were admitting that they were helpless against the alien invasion force. Dr. Walsh raised his hand tentatively. There might be another option, but it's extremely risky. Carter nodded for him to continue. Project Midnight Sun has been developing weapons based on theoretical physics that we barely understand ourselves. Quantum disruptors, singularity bombs, reality manipulation devices. The technology is highly experimental and potentially dangerous to use, but it might be our only chance. How dangerous? Asked the British Prime Minister. We could accidentally tear holes in space-time itself, Walsh admitted. But considering the alternative, I think we have to try. Meanwhile, the hegemony began their assault exactly as planned. Precise energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking military bases around the world. The alien weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy, leaving the infrastructure intact for future use while eliminating any threat to the occupation forces. The first target was Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. The base commander, Colonel Ben Harper, watched helplessly as the alien beam carved through their defensive systems like they were made of paper. In seconds, every aircraft, missile system, and communication array was reduced to molten metal. But something unexpected happened next. Instead of surrendering or retreating, Harper grabbed a rifle and led his surviving troops in a counterattack against the alien landing craft that had just touched down near the base. It was a futile gesture by any logical standard, but Harper and his soldiers fought with a ferocity that surprised even themselves. Across the globe, similar scenes played out at every military installation. Humans, who should have been paralyzed, with fear instead fought back with weapons that couldn't possibly hurt their attackers. They used rocket launchers against energy shields, threw grenades at armored alien soldiers, and charged positions that any reasonable tactical analysis would declare impregnable. On his flagship, Vextar watched the reports with growing confusion. Sub-Commander explained to me why these primitives continue to resist. Our tactical analysis clearly demonstrates that their weapons cannot harm our forces. Kael'Tris consulted his data screens, equally puzzled. I cannot explain it, Overlord. By all logical parameters, they should have surrendered after the first demonstration of our superiority. Yet they continue to fight, as if they believe they can actually win. Perhaps their intelligence is even more limited than we estimated, Vextar suggested. But then something happened that had never occurred in the hegemony's long history of conquest. Captain Emma Rodriguez, leading a squadron of experimental fighters from Edwards Air Force Base, managed to penetrate the energy shields of a hegemony destroyer. Rodriguez had volunteered for a suicide mission, knowing that her pilots had no chance of survival. But hidden in her fighter's payload were prototype quantum disruptors from Project Midnight Sun. The weapons were untested, unstable, and likely to kill the pilots using them, but Rodriguez didn't care about the odds. "This is Eagle Squadron," Rodriguez broadcast as her fighters screamed toward the alien ship. "We're going in." The quantum disruptors destabilized the alien shields for exactly 14 seconds before overloading and destroying Rodriguez's entire squadron. But in those 14 seconds, conventional missiles fired by other human aircraft managed to punch through the barrier and damage the destroyer's hull. Alarms sounded throughout the hegemony fleet as damage reports flooded in. For the first time in their empire's history, a primitive species had actually hurt one of their ships. "Impossible," Kael'Tris whispered, staring at the tactical display. "Their technology level should make this impossible." Vextar's calm demeanor cracked slightly. "Perhaps we underestimated their capabilities. Increase the bombardment intensity and deploy ground forces immediately." But the humans' response to increased pressure was not what the hegemony expected. Instead of breaking under, the assault human resistance became more determined. Cities that came under alien attack didn't panic and flee. They organized into resistance cells. Military units that lost their equipment improvised new weapons. Civilians who had never held a gun picked up rifles and joined the fight. Dr. Walsh worked frantically in his underground laboratory, pushing his team to complete weapons that had been in development for years. The quantum disruptors that Rodriguez had used were just the beginning. Project Midnight Sun had been exploring the fundamental forces of the universe, developing technologies that could manipulate reality itself. "How long until the singularity?" "Bombs are ready," Walsh asked his chief technician. "Another 18 hours, maybe less if we skip the safety protocols," came the reply. "Skip them," Walsh ordered. "At this point, the risk is acceptable." Jake Morrison and his crew aboard the Guardian continued their reconnaissance of the alien fleet, gathering crucial intelligence about hegemony technology and tactics. Dr. Brooks had discovered something disturbing in the alien communications they had intercepted. "Jake, I think I know why these aliens are so confident," Amanda announced. They're not just conquerors. According to these transmissions, they're refugees. Refugees from what? Jake asked. Something called the Devourers. Apparently, the Hegemony's original homeworld was destroyed by this other alien race, and they've been fleeing across the galaxy ever since. They conquer other worlds not just for resources, but to stay ahead of whatever is chasing them. This information changed everything. The Hegemony wasn't just an empire bent on conquest. They were a desperate species, running from an even greater threat. And now they had made the mistake of trying to enslave the one species in the galaxy that refused to accept defeat, even in the face of impossible odds. As the countdown to humanity's deadline continued, both sides prepared for a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. The Hegemony had the superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity before. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one with nothing left to lose. Deep beneath the Arctic ice, Dr. Walsh led President Carter and General Powell through the most classified facility on Earth. The corridors were lined with equipment that seemed to bend light around it, and the air itself felt different, charged with an energy that made their skin tingle. Project Midnight Sun began 12 years ago as a theoretical physics research program, Walsh explained as they walked. We were trying to understand the fundamental forces that hold the universe together. What we discovered was that reality itself is far more fragile than anyone imagined. They entered a massive chamber where scientists worked on devices that hurt to look at directly. The machines seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, their shapes shifting and changing as the observers watched. These are reality anchors, Walsh continued, gesturing to the largest device. They can lock space-time itself into a fixed pattern, and this, he pointed to a smaller, more ominous-looking machine, is a singularity bomb. It creates controlled black holes that we can aim at specific targets. Carter stared at the weapons with a mixture of awe and terror. Kevin, are you telling me we've been building weapons that can manipulate the fabric of space-time? Among other things, yes, Walsh replied. The quantum disruptors that Captain Rodriguez used were just the beginning. We have devices that can phase matter between dimensions, weapons that fire bullets made of condensed dark energy, and something we call the reality fracture cannon that can literally erase targets from existence. Powell frowned as he examined the equipment. Why wasn't the military informed about these weapons earlier? Because they're incredibly dangerous, Walsh admitted. One miscalculation, and we could accidentally destroy our own solar system. We never planned to use them unless humanity faced complete extinction. Well, that time has come, Carter said grimly. Meanwhile, Colonel Harper was leading the first field test of humanity's new weapons. His base had been destroyed in the initial alien attack, but he and his surviving troops had regrouped in the mountains nearby. They were now carrying prototype weapons that military scientists barely understood. Remember, these quantum rifles are unstable, Harper told his squad. They might work perfectly, or they might explode in your hands. Either way, we're going to make these aliens pay for what they did to our home. The alien ground forces had established a landing zone in the valley below, confident that their energy shields made them invulnerable to human weapons. They were completely unprepared for what happened next. Harper's first shot from a quantum rifle punched through an alien soldier's personal shield like it wasn't there. The rifle overloaded immediately after firing, but the alien was dead, and that was all that mattered. Within minutes, Harper's squad was wreaking havoc among the alien troops using weapons that shouldn't have been able to touch them. The battle was brief, but devastating. Harper lost half his men when their weapons malfunctioned, but they completely destroyed an entire alien battalion. More importantly, they proved that humanity could fight back effectively with the right equipment. Reports of the successful engagement spread quickly through human resistance networks. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had won a significant victory against the alien forces. Morale skyrocketed as word spread that the invaders could be hurt. Overlord Vextar reviewed the battle reports with growing alarm. His ground commanders were reporting casualties that should have been impossible, given the technological disparity between the species. Sub-Commander Keltris, how are these humans damaging our forces? Vextar demanded. Their weapons appear to operate on principles we don't fully understand, Keltris replied, studying the tactical data. They're using some form of quantum manipulation that bypasses our defensive systems. That's impossible. Our intelligence indicated that this species hadn't even achieved faster than light travel. How could they possess quantum manipulation technology? Perhaps we made an error in our assessment, Keltris suggested carefully. On the Guardian, Jake Morrison was making discoveries that would prove crucial to humanity's survival. Dr. Brooks had been analyzing the alien fleet's composition and had found something significant. Jake, look at this, Amanda called excitedly. The hegemony fleet isn't just warships. At least 30% of their vessels are refugee transports carrying survivors from conquered worlds. Jake studied the sensor readings she was showing him. How many people are we talking about? Millions. Maybe tens of millions. And here's the interesting part. They're not all the same species. I'm reading at least a dozen different biological signatures. The hegemony has been collecting survivors from every world they've conquered. This revelation changed Jake's understanding of the entire situation. The hegemony wasn't just an aggressive empire. They were shepherding the survivors of their conquests, keeping them alive for some unknown purpose. Why would they keep prisoners from so many different worlds? Lisa wondered. Maybe they're not prisoners, Ryan suggested. Maybe they're refugees too, fleeing from the same threat that destroyed the hegemony's homeworld. Dr. Brooks continued her analysis and made another disturbing discovery. I'm detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the galaxy. Something big is heading this way and it's moving fast. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Devourers? It's possible. If the hegemony has been running from this threat for centuries, their arrival at Earth might not be a coincidence. They might be making a stand here. Back on Earth, the alien bombardment was intensifying as Vextar grew frustrated with human resistance. Major cities came under direct attack as the hegemony abandoned their surgical strikes in favor of overwhelming force. But instead of breaking human morale, the increased violence had the opposite effect. Humans who had been trying to find diplomatic solutions now joined the resistance. Scientists who had spent their careers on peaceful research volunteered to build weapons. Even children were contributing by carrying messages between resistance cells and helping wounded fighters. Dr. Walsh's team achieved a breakthrough when they successfully created a stable singularity bomb. The weapon was small enough to fit in a backpack but powerful enough to destroy a city-sized alien ship. The beauty of this design, Walsh explained to President Carter, is that it doesn't just destroy the target. It creates a localized space-time distortion that makes it impossible for other ships to occupy that area for several hours. How many can you build? Carter asked. With our current resources, maybe 20 before we run out of exotic matter. But 20 is enough to cripple their fleet if we use them strategically. The first Singularity bomb was deployed against a hegemony command ship that had been coordinating attacks against European cities. The weapon was delivered by a volunteer pilot who flew a modified stealth aircraft directly into the alien vessel's docking bay. The explosion was unlike anything ever witnessed in human history. The alien ship simply ceased to exist, replaced by a swirling vortex of distorted space-time that consumed everything within a kilometer radius. The surrounding hegemony vessels fled in panic as their sensors registered readings they had never seen before. What did they just do? Keltris whispered, staring at the impossible readings on his instruments. Vexitar was silent for a long moment, studying the tactical display. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he was facing an enemy that possessed weapons he didn't understand. Signal the fleet, he finally ordered. Prepare for full planetary bombardment. These humans are more dangerous than we anticipated, but as the hegemony prepared to escalate the conflict, they didn't know that humanity was preparing its own ultimatum. President Carter was about to deliver a message that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The war was about to enter a new phase, and the aliens were about to discover that the most dangerous enemy is not always the one with superior technology. Sometimes it's the one that refuses to give up, no matter how hopeless the situation appears. President Carter stood in the underground bunker that had become humanity's command center. watching as technicians made final preparations for the most important broadcast in human history. The deadline given by the aliens had passed 6 hours. Ego and Overlord Vextar was preparing to destroy every major city on Earth. "Madam President, the reality anchors are in position," Dr. Walsh reported from his station. "Once we activate them, nothing will be able to enter or leave this solar system through hyperspace." Carter nodded grimly. The plan was incredibly risky, but it was humanity's only chance. They had discovered the hegemony's greatest weakness, their need to keep moving to stay ahead of the devourers. By trapping them in the solar system, humanity could force them into a situation they had spent centuries trying to avoid. "General Powell, what's the status of our weapons deployment?" Carter asked. "All remaining singularity bombs are in position," Powell replied. "We have volunteer pilots standing by to deliver them to target ships. The quantum disruptor arrays are charged and ready. If this doesn't work, we'll have expended our entire arsenal." Carter took a deep breath and stepped in front of the camera. This broadcast would reach not just Earth but every ship in the hegemony fleet. Jake Morrison and his crew aboard the Guardian had helped them hack into the alien communication network, ensuring that everyone would hear humanity's response to the invasion. "My name is Helen Carter, President of the United States and representative of the human species," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. "Overlord Vextar, you have demanded our surrender, but you have made a critical error in your calculations." On the bridge of his flagship, Vexitar watched the transmission with interest. He had expected pleading or desperate offers of negotiation, not this calm defiance from a species facing extinction. "You believe that because your technology is superior, victory is inevitable," Carter continued. "But you don't understand what you're really fighting. Humans don't surrender simply because the odds are against us. We fight harder when we're cornered, and we never give up when defending our home." The broadcast continued with Carter revealing everything humanity had learned about the hegemony. They knew about the refugee ships hidden in the fleet. They knew about the devourers pursuing them across the galaxy. Most importantly, they knew that the hegemony was desperate, not invincible. "But here's what you don't know about us," Carter said, her voice growing harder. "We've been preparing for this day longer than you realize. Our weapons aren't primitive. They're based on physics that your scientists have never explored. We can manipulate space-time itself, and we're about to prove it." At that moment, Dr. Walsh activated the reality anchors positioned throughout the solar system. The effect was immediate and devastating to the hegemony fleet. Every ship trying to charge their hyperspace drives suddenly found themselves unable to establish the necessary space-time distortion field. Panic spread through the alien fleet as commanders realized they were trapped. For centuries, the hegemony's survival had depended on their ability to flee when threatened. Now they were locked in a star system with no way to escape. "What is happening?" Vexitar demanded as his navigation officer reported the impossible readings. "Overlord, we cannot engage hyperspace drives," Kale Triss replied, his voice tight with fear. "Something is preventing us from accessing subspace entirely." Carter's broadcast continued, her words carrying across every ship in the fleet. "You have 72 hours to make a choice, Overlord Vextar. You can continue this war and face complete destruction, or you can accept our terms for negotiation." "What terms?" Vextar found himself asking, even though the human couldn't hear him. As if reading his mind, Carter provided the answer. "First, you will immediately cease all attacks on Earth and withdraw your ground forces. Second, you will release all refugee populations currently held aboard your vessels. Third, you will enter into formal negotiations for a mutual defense pact against the devourers." The conditions were not what Vextar had expected. Instead of demanding the hegemony's surrender, the humans were offering an alliance. But the implications were clear. If he refused, humanity would keep the reality anchors active, trapping his fleet until the devourers arrived. "And if we refuse?" Vextar asked aloud, knowing that his own crew was wondering the same thing. Carter's final words answered that question. "If you refuse, we will maintain the space-time lock until your ancient enemies find you. You've been running from the devourers for centuries, but you can't run from this system. Your choice is simple: Face them alone, or face them alongside humanity. Jake Morrison watched the broadcast from the Guardian's bridge, feeling a mixture of pride and terror at his species' boldness. They were essentially holding the entire hegemony fleet hostage, betting everything on the aliens' fear of the Devourers. "Jake, I'm reading massive energy spikes from the edge of the solar system," Dr. Brooks announced urgently. "Something big just dropped out of hyperspace." Jake felt his blood run cold. "How big?" "Bigger than the entire hegemony fleet combined, and the energy signatures don't match anything in our databases." The Devourers had arrived. On his flagship, Vextar received the same sensor readings and felt fear like he had never experienced before. The enemy that had haunted his species for generations was here, and his fleet was trapped with nowhere to run. "Overlord, the Devourers have deployed hunter-killer squadrons," Kael'Tris reported. "They're moving to engage our perimeter ships." Vextar watched as the mechanical ships of his ancient enemy began their attack. The Devourers were exactly as terrifying as the historical records described, massive vessels that consumed everything in their path, converting matter and energy into more of themselves. "Open a channel to the human president," Vextar ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Overlord?" Kael'Tris asked in surprise. "Do it now," Vextar commanded. Carter's image appeared on the main screen, and for the first time since the invasion began, the alien leader found himself speaking to a human as an equal. "President Carter, I accept your terms," Vextar said simply. "Our fleets will combine against the Devourers, but you must understand, these machines have destroyed every civilization they've encountered. Even together, we may not be strong enough to stop them." Carter smiled, and there was something in her expression that reminded Vextar why his species had never encountered resistance like humanity's. "Overlord Vextar, you're about to learn something important about humans. We've never met an enemy we couldn't defeat when we put our minds to it. The Devourers may have destroyed every other civilization, but they've never faced humanity before." As the two fleets prepared to combine their forces against the approaching threat, the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. For the first time in their history, the Devourers would face an enemy that refused to be consumed, backed by technology that could manipulate the very fabric of reality itself. The real war was just beginning. The combined human hegemony fleet moved into formation as the Devourer ships approached Earth's outer defenses. Admiral Stone aboard the newly commissioned UES Defiance coordinated with Overlord Vextar to merge their tactical systems. What they saw on the combined displays made even the seasoned alien commander pause in shock. "By the void," Vextar whispered as he studied the enemy formation. "There are more of them than we've ever faced before." The Devourer fleet consisted of massive geometric shapes that seemed to absorb light itself. Each ship was the size of a small moon, and there were dozens of them. They moved with mechanical precision, consuming space debris and asteroids as they advanced, growing larger with each passing hour. "Admiral Stone, our conventional weapons have proven ineffective against Devourer hulls in previous encounters," Vextar explained over the communication link. "Their ships repair themselves faster than we can damage them." Stone studied the tactical readouts from his command chair. "What about our quantum weapons, Dr. Walsh?" Walsh, now serving as chief science officer aboard the Defiance, checked his instruments. "The singularity bombs should be effective, but we only have 12 remaining. We need to make each shot count." Jake Morrison had volunteered to lead the first mixed squadron in galactic history. His ship, the Guardian, had been retrofitted with both human quantum weapons and hegemony shield technology. Beside him flew alien pilots who had been enemies just hours before. "All squadrons, this is Morrison," Jake broadcast to the combined fleet. "Remember, our goal isn't to destroy these ships. It's to keep them busy while the reality anchors are reconfigured." The first wave of Devourers reached the fleet's perimeter, and the battle began immediately. Hegemony energy weapons struck the mechanical ships with devastating force, but the damage healed within seconds as nanomachines rebuilt the destroyed sections. Human missiles exploded against Devourer hulls without leaving so much as a scratch. But when Jake's squadron opened fire with quantum disruptors, something unexpected happened. The weapons didn't just damage the Devourer ships, they prevented them from repairing themselves. Holes torn in the mechanical hulls stayed open, venting atmosphere and sparking with damaged systems. "Vextar, are you seeing this?" Admiral Stone called over the communication system. "Impossible," the alien commander replied. "Nothing has ever been able to prevent Devourer self-repair systems from functioning." Dr. Walsh was frantically analyzing the battle data from his station. "Admiral, I think I understand what's happening. Our quantum weapons operate by temporarily destabilizing the local space-time continuum. The Devourer repair systems must rely on stable dimensional matrices to function. Can we use this against the larger ships?" Stone asked. "If we can get close enough," Walsh confirmed. "But we'll need to coordinate our attacks precisely." Meanwhile, something else was happening that would change the course of the battle. The refugee populations aboard the hegemony ships had been listening to the communications between their captors and humanity. Captain Emma Rodriguez, who had survived her earlier suicide mission and was now leading a human fighter squadron, received an unexpected transmission. "Human pilot, this is Commander Zara of the Velkan Resistance," came a voice speaking accented but clear English. "My people have been enslaved by the hegemony for 40 years. We want to fight alongside you." Rodriguez looked at her tactical display and saw that the transmission was coming from one of the hegemony refugee ships. "Commander Zara, what kind of ships do you have access to?" "We've been secretly modifying hegemony fighters for years, preparing for this moment. We have 300 combat-ready vessels and pilots trained in guerrilla warfare." Within minutes, the refugee ships were launching their own fighters to join the battle. Species that had been conquered by the hegemony were now fighting beside their former captors against a common enemy. The Velkan ships were followed by fighters from a dozen other species, each bringing their own unique combat techniques and weapon systems. The tide of battle began to turn as the combined forces discovered that diversity was their greatest strength. While Devourer ships could adapt to any single type of attack, they couldn't keep up with the constantly changing tactics of a dozen different species fighting together. "All ships, this is Admiral Stone," the human commander broadcast to the entire fleet. "Dr. Walsh has identified the Devourer's weakness. We're going to use the reality anchors to trap them in normal space permanently." The plan was audacious, even by human standards. Instead of simply preventing hyperspace travel, they would reconfigure the reality anchors to create a permanent dimensional lock around the Devourers themselves. The machines would be trapped in three-dimensional space, unable to access the higher dimensions they needed for their advanced technology. "The risk is enormous," Dr. Walsh warned. "If we make a mistake, we could collapse local space-time and destroy this entire star system." "What's the alternative?" Stone asked. "The Devourers consume everything in their path," Vextar answered. "If they're not stopped here, they'll continue across the galaxy until nothing remains." President Carter, monitoring the battle from Earth's command center, made the final decision. "Dr. Walsh, activate the dimensional lock." The reality anchors spread throughout the solar system began working in perfect synchronization, creating a web of space-time distortions that surrounded the Devourer fleet. The effect was immediate. The mechanical ships suddenly found themselves unable to access the quantum dimensions that powered their advanced systems. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers were vulnerable. "All squadrons target the flagship," Jake Morrison ordered as he led the final assault. "Quantum disruptors at maximum power." The combined fleet poured everything they had into the largest Devourer ship. Human singularity bombs created holes in its hull while hegemony plasma cannons prevented it from maneuvering. Refugee fighters from a dozen worlds struck at its weak points with weapons designed for asymmetric warfare. The Devourer flagship, a machine the size of a small city, began to break apart under the relentless assault. As it died, something unexpected happened. The other Devourer ships began to retreat, fleeing the battlefield for the first time in their recorded history. "They're running," Dr. Brooks announced from the Guardian science station. "The Devourers are actually retreating, but the victory came with a cost. The dimensional lock had worked too well. Nothing could enter or leave the solar system through hyperspace. Earth was safe, but it was also isolated from the rest of the galaxy." "How long will the lock remain in place?" Admiral Stone asked. "With current power levels, approximately 50 years. Dr. Walsh replied. But we can modify it to allow controlled passage once we understand the technology better. Overlord Vextar stood on his bridge looking at Earth through the viewport. His species had spent centuries running from the Devourers, never believing they could be defeated. Now they had witnessed something that changed everything. President Carter, Vextar said over the communication link, the hegemony formally requests permission to establish a permanent alliance with humanity. Granted, Carter replied without hesitation. But there are conditions. All refugee populations must be freed, and the hegemony must transition from conquest to cooperation. Agreed, Vextar said immediately. We have much to learn from your species about courage and determination. Jake Morrison flew the Guardian back toward Earth, exhausted but victorious. The galaxy would remember this day as the turning point when the unstoppable Devourers were finally stopped. But more importantly, it was the day when dozens of species learned that they could work together to overcome any threat. Dr. Walsh began work immediately on modifying the reality anchors to allow safe passage for friendly ships. Earth would become the center of a new galactic alliance, one built on cooperation rather than conquest. As the refugees from the hegemony ships began settling on planets throughout the solar system, humanity found itself at the center of something unprecedented. They had united the galaxy not through force but by refusing to surrender in the face of impossible odds. The war was over, but humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. They had proven that courage and determination could overcome superior technology, and that diversity was the greatest strength any civilization could possess. The galaxy would never be the same again, and that was exactly what humanity had intended.